Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Radiant Others. My name is Dan Blacksburg, and as always, I'm recording from my West Philly basement. I'm a Philadelphia-based klezmer trombonist, teacher, composer, play a lot of other kinds of music besides klezmer, and I do this podcast, Radiant Others, so that I get a chance to have really deep conversations with people who make up our big Yiddish world, whether they're musicians, scholars, visual artists, as you'll hear today, and all sorts of other people who make up our big, or at least my idea of our big Yiddish world and beyond. And I get these deep conversations that I get to share with all of you. It is a joy. And today, another one that I'm really excited to share with you, I am talking today with the Magid Ensemble. So we've got musicians Rachel Leader, Matthias Kaufman, Ralphie Bowden, Yiddishist and storyteller Weaver, and visual artist Kaya Raymond. And they've kind of taken the scene by storm with their new multimedia performance piece, Sterne and the Lost Voice. Sterne is many things. Technically, it's a live performance of a cranky, which is a long scroll wound onto two spools that illustrates the story as it unwinds. Jewish people, in general, without the crank that winds it, we're pretty used to this kind of format, And it also, so it's a cranky with the live storytelling and music. So it's a theater piece. It's a piece of visual art. It's a piece of music. It's a new Yiddish folktale. And overall, it's just a very deeply affecting work. So I wanted to sit down and talk with all these folks about what it took to bring them together, what it took to create this work, why, and what it's been like doing it. What was the process of creating it? How has it changed over its time, both before it was ready for public consumption and now that they've been touring it all over the country? We get to talk about a lot of influences and how we get to draw influences really from wherever we are called to through our own personal experience of listening to music, visual art. Specifically, we get to talk about some fun potential connections between Japanese video game and film music and Yiddish or klezmer music. There's something there, whether it's just us as people or something in the music. We also, once again, get into a lot of ways concepts we might associate with fantasy or sci-fi can be found in old folkloric sources. One idea would be the midrash, the idea of telling many different versions of the same biblical story or stories around the biblical story, kind of like the current hip fad of talking about multiverses or a multiverse with many, many different versions of the same thing happening all at once. How about that? So this conversation shows how far out and how far inside ourselves we can go as artists and people when we come from a rooted place. Just like for us, it might be our rootedness in Yiddish culture, but it's true of really anybody, and you can create your own roots both within and outside of traditions. One of the great things that we get to talk about is I get to bring in some of my friends who I collaborate with mostly outside of the Yiddish world, such as visual artist Eric Ruin, who, alongside all the connections that come up in the episode, was also a faculty member at Klez Canada a couple years ago, and my good friend Alex Smith, who worked with me on my latest solo release, The Psychic Body Sound System. In fact, he came up with that amazing title. As always, if you love what we do, please rate and review us with as many stars as your podcast app will allow you, and share it with your friends. Share our posts on social media, Instagram and Blue Sky especially. Follow us, and if you have some extra bucks lying around, we would love your financial support. The best way to do that is either contacting us directly at radiantothers@gmail.com or contacting me, and you can find me on the internet, or you can go to patreon.com/radiantothers and donate there. One of these days, we'll actually start producing some Patreon subscriber exclusive content. But in the meantime, just do it because you love what we do. Because we love you, and we love doing this. And by we, I mean me and my producer, Bela Unger. And we love sharing this music, sharing this culture, sharing the people and the stories of the people who make it happen. So without further ado, let's hear the stories and get into my conversation with the Magid Ensemble. All right, welcome back to another episode of Radiant Others, and I am so happy to be here with all of them, the Magid Ensemble. This is a great group of people who are doing a really cool project and bringing it all over the place so far, hopefully to even more places, which we're going to learn all about. And that sounds even more like a radio announcement than I usually do at the beginning of these things. But so let's get it back to the people. Just since there's a whole bunch of us today, just introduce yourselves and however you prefer, and specifically let us know what you do in this group.
Hi, I'm Weaver, and I'm the storyteller in the Magid Ensemble.
Hey Dan, good to be here. I'm Rachel, and I'm the violinist.
I'm Matthias. I play accordion and compose music.
I'm Kaya. I feel like this gets into like what this project is, but I am the cranky operator, cranky in quotations. Basically, it's a scroll in a box, and you turn a handle, and it's the storytelling device that goes with the storyteller telling the story and the musicians playing the live score. But I was the creator of the paper cut cranky.
Hey everybody, I'm Rafi. I'm the cellist in Magid Ensemble and also worked with, well, all of us together to arrange the music and compose a little bit.
Awesome. And I am your host, Dan Blacksburg. Before we even jump in, so the Magid Ensemble, as I understand it, is a group that's come together to perform a live performance that includes live storytelling, live music, and specifically centered around this cranky, this shadow puppet theater score that's on scrolls that moves across sort of a built. It's a one piece kind of thing. It's like a one pot meal. Like you have to make the art, but then you also build the thing that lets the art get from the beginning to the end of it. So if Kaya or anyone else, you could give us a little bit more for people who maybe that's a new art form. I've had the opportunity of performing a bunch of these things in some different context, usually not a klezmer context in any way. So it's really cool to see it this way. And, we'll get into the piece itself a lot, but there's also an opportunity to let this conversation go. But first, a little more about the cranky. We don't have to make any of the puns that are right on the tips of our tongues. So you can, dear listeners, you just imagine your own puns. Insert your own pun here. But yeah, crankies.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like there's a lot that we can say
right?
here. I'm curious about your experience with crankies.
Yeah.
I'm coming to this project really from an old time music background. I'm not really in the klezmer scene. And I think there's been a big revival of crankies in the old time scene specifically, which is how I first saw them. I first saw Anna and Elizabeth perform some in Ashfield, Mass. But basically, the word cranky comes from, I think, Peter Schulman of Bread and Puppet. So it's like a more recent thing to call them crankies. And they call them crankies because of like turning this crank that moves the scroll. But the cranky is just, it was called a scrolling panorama before that. It has this long history of like, I guess first panorama and then scrolling panoramas, which are like in the like mid 18th century and 19th century. There were these like traveling, basically theater of like, yeah, telling stories. A lot of it was stories of like travel and showing people places that they couldn't see otherwise. But there's also examples of like abolitionists using them to show stories of slavery and like bringing those to England to show what was happening. There's a lot I could say about that, but that's basically the like rough trajectory.
Yeah, and just to give people like a sense of what this feels like if they haven't seen the piece, which I think a lot of our listeners probably have at this point, but it's usually fairly small, like it's small enough that you can carry it, right? It's a piece that usually can be operated by one person. And was it always paper cuts or mostly paper cuts, or was it also kind of other, ways of medium? And it's kind of like this proto film almost,
Yeah, I think most of them actually weren't paper cuts. I think they were mostly painted originally,
Okay,
but then it's like the shadow puppetry paper cut has its own whole history, which is
totally.
ancient, I think originating in China mostly, which I think is also where paper was invented. Um, but yeah, I think that basically just because it's such an accessible form or medium, it just has a really long, rich history. And then specifically like Jewish paper cut history
Yes.
is, yeah, we'll go into that, but I got a lot of inspiration from that. But there's like history of like scrolling panoramas, paper cut, and then also shadow puppetry, I think are the big things here.
Absolutely. And it's like, just remember that like art was a great way to deliver the news back in the day. It like it's not
Totally.
that different now. It's just video, so we don't think of it as art. But it still takes a lot of work to make those things, as any of us content creators know. But yeah, just my thing is that there's a really close friend of mine in West Philly, Eric Ruin, who is a fantastic paper cut artist. Everybody's nodding their heads. You might have seen a big black and white and red paper cut of his with this quote that says, like, in the dark times will there still be singing? And yes, they'll be singing about the dark times. That's one of his. I've seen that at a lot of friends' houses. And, if you check out my old band, Electric Simcha, he did the artwork for our like pandemic era re-release Joy, and he has a live ensemble called the Ominous Cloud Ensemble, where he's using mostly transparencies of his paper cuts and two overhead projectors, and he basically improvises, and we use a visual score that he's improvising alongside. Now he's incorporated video, but he did sometime a number of years ago find 100-foot scroll of paper somewhere and just eventually just freeform like improvised cut the whole thing. And so I think I remember performing at the 50-foot mark. Like he was like, I made 50 feet of paper cuts, we're going to perform this with the band. And then so we did that. So but again, that's not Jewish music. And although he's really into Brecht and he's really into like all this other stuff, so there's like the Venn diagram's really close to a circle, but it really, it's coming from a much more of like an improvised music perspective, ambient music. And that's not super far away from some of the stuff that you all have brought into this project, right? So let's like dive in straight to the creation of this group, this piece. Let's start with the piece and then well, you start wherever you feel like starting, but because there's this idea of a group, like you call yourselves an ensemble, you don't say, hey, we're touring this work. We're not like the Alvin Ailey Dance Company touring our current production of blah, blah, blah. You're like, we're the Magid Ensemble, and that just happens to be this piece currently, which, of course, we'll get into all of that. So, yeah, how did this all come together? And I think both from, like, the story of, well, I got really into klezmer music, or I dragged this other person really into klezmer music, or, I always wanted to do an X or Y or Z, but I think that's enough. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I can share a little. Yeah, we came together. I was really excited about this project because I really wanted to weave together different disciplines and have a touring show that was both music and storytelling and visual art. And there's a dance part in this piece as well, and just kind of like weaving as many kind of different like strands of Yiddish culture together in a performance piece that was also tourable. Like it is like a very portable system, but it's also expansive and big, and like what you can do with shadow and light is really exciting. And it's really compelling and immersive, but also really simple, which is part of the beauty of it. So yeah, Matthias and Rafi and I have been playing together for a while, and I've known Weaver through the klezmer scene, and I knew Kaya from way back when we lived together, actually, a while ago. And that's how I discovered Crankies as well. I'd seen Kaya's gorgeous Crankies that were all hand paper cut, and I was always so compelled by them, and just the power of music to transform a space, the power of just a light box to completely transform an environment, and storytelling, just like all these elements were always really inspiring to me. And I just was like, what if we could put them all together? And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And then we were lucky enough to receive grant funding for this project. And so I called people up and was like, well, I guess we can do this.
Yeah, you got to do it now.
Yeah. So started with that, and then things, what made it possible. And I feel like, from like a visioning perspective, like I think, that's where I brought in a lot of my creativity and just like excitement about like making this as collaborative and like personal as possible. Like when you say it's like, it's not the Alvinelli Dance Company. It's like, what does this group look like when we're all like sharing something that's like meaningful and personal to us and that's specific to us, and that's completely collaborative. Like when you see the show, there's not like a star. It's like it's like 3 different elements or more, the cranky, the music, the beautiful original story that Weaver wrote, all coming together and like not like competing for space, but just like uplifting each other. And it's been a really collaborative process putting it together. And we could say more about how that all came together, but it was over the course of about 2 years, from visioning to carrying it out and through residencies and kind of like doing a lot of workshopping. And then also like last week realizing that we put together a theater piece. We didn't know about theater.
I knew about theater.
Yeah, right.
Weaver knew about theater. We were like, I guess this is theater. Like I don't have a theater background. I was like, I guess this is theater. And I'm like, maybe I like theater. Anyways.
I think musicians are always falling backwards into theater, but it also goes both ways.
I didn't know about
I just
that.
talked to Daniel Kahn, and he was just talking about being a theater kid falling backwards into music.
Right,
so,
exactly.
I think it really goes both ways. But yeah, one of the things I was just thinking about was like, and people jump in at whatever point, but the only other thing I wanted to inject in this thing is like, what were some of the overlaps that you came in with in terms of skills or experiences or desires? And then what were some things like you were like, oh, crap, I got to get ready. I got to be able to do X, Y, and Z that I got to really pay attention to.
I feel like I really struggled with this because this is Weaver, who's the storyteller, and I have a really varied background in theater, from playwriting to directing to acting to stagehand work, which is how I make money, and puppet mask stuff, like kind of all over the place. And storytelling in the Jewish tradition is something that from a young age I was exposed to and learned about, and observed and enjoyed, and like became so deep in my heart from my teacher, Rabbi Stephen Sager, who was an amazing Magid, particularly of Elijah stories. And so my experience in storytelling to that point had been Rachel would throw these parties like Klaus Cummington or just like community parties, and sometimes I would tell an Elijah story or another story, some kind of folk tale that was not original but that I'd learned from somewhere at the parties, and I'd tell them very sort of like improvisationally. I wouldn't necessarily prepare in advance that much. And the way that this came together was I developed the story first and then recorded myself telling the story and sent it to Kaya and to Rafi, Rachel, and Matthias. And then that was the basis from which Kaya made the cranky, and then the musicians composed the music. And then we kind of put everything back together this past April, I guess last year, almost to the day.
Almost to the day, actually.
Oh, wow, nice.
And miraculously, it all really came together beautifully. But my challenge for that I felt so resistant to for a long time was that, no, you actually have to memorize it, and you actually have to have these cues and hit these cues, and you can't like change things every single time. Because like it's like that tension of like, I was seeing it as a storytelling thing initially as I was developing it and writing it, but then I realized that it was a piece of theater, and that pieces of theater have to have cues, and that so it's what you asked earlier of like what kind of a show is this, or like how would you define like what you're like. It is like sort of strange that all of us are so deep in our disciplines, but like it's making this thing that is greater than the sum of those parts, and they're all feeding into it.
I think we had a moment like that, the musicians too, when we were like, we've been playing together, the 3 of us, for years in different, like in Mama Liga and other configurations. And we've never been on scripts per se, like we have tunes and we have some arrangements but a lot of it is like in the moment, and we're reacting to each other and taking in new directions. And this, it was like, it took a while to get there with this, because first we had to be like, wait, we have to like, if we want this to work with the story, we have to pick the exact spots that line up, and like remember them, and coordinate, and it can't be all just like on the fly.
Yeah. Weaver, you wrote the story. You have a relationship with Elijah's stories. This isn't Elijah's story, even though, he's in the story enough. And, I was thinking, like, where does the, is this story, how much of it's based on stuff you already knew? How much did you make up? And then I think that would be a really great segue of like, well, we made this up, so now we got to make up this music and all this other stuff.
A lot of the Elijah stories, at least in folklore that I'm aware of, Elijah definitely isn't the central figure or the hero of the story. He shows up and sort of like kicks off someone else's development as a person, or someone else's like journey of transformation that they go on. So in that way is sort of this very like trickster genre type archetype. So yeah, the story was sort of an amalgamation of a lot of different folklore pulled from a lot of different sources that I just sort of over the years learned and was exposed to. I learned Yiddish in college, and had a particular interest in Yiddish theater and folklore, and Hasidic stories. And I'd been writing also just plays and stories, not necessarily related to any of these topics, for a long time. This particular story and the themes that I feel like I explore through it came up because, it was sort of right in like a hard time in COVID that we started thinking about it. And I wanted to tell a story where someone loses an ability, a physical ability that they think they can't live without, because, a lot of people in our community were becoming disabled, and there was a lot of loss around that. And so a story that's appropriate for all ages, that really acknowledges the loss and the pain of that, but also like shows how you have to, in this situation, just find a new way to express yourself and a new way to live, and that in this new approach to life that you find, there can be a lot of transformation and things that you never thought you could do before. So that was sort of the themes that I was trying to express through this language of fantasy and folklore, and through this cultural context.
Awesome. And so that story came together through, I'm assuming, a bunch of discussions and just like dreaming about something. And then it went out to the rest of you. And what was that experience like, building this thing? Obviously, Kaya, you've made Crankies before. You're a paper, you've done the artwork, you've done the process of this before. And I know the three of you have done the process of making this music before. And like, yeah, how was that? How'd that all go?
I'll jump in. This is Kaya. Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to just like Rachel got us this grant, and just like Rachel sort of connected us all in this project. But she like called me. I think it was kind of funny because I lived in Western Mass, where most of all of these folks live, for over a decade, and I had just made the move to Portland, Oregon, and like didn't have a job yet, was like living in this apartment by myself, was like just starting to make friends. And Rachel called me pretty much in that first month and was like, hey, do you want to do your dream project? We have funding for it. I guess no, we didn't know we had the funding, but she was applying for it. But it just worked out really well that I just like, yeah, happened to just have all of this time on my hands to make it happen. And then I guess pretty soon after, I think I asked Weaver for the story, and then like a month went by. And then Weaver, you were like, you're like, oh, actually, I realized that I can't write this out. It has to be, I need you. Oh, and you couldn't record it even for yourself. You had to record it in front of an
I
audience.
kept trying to record it like by myself
totally
in my
hear that.
room, and I'd be like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I can't.
I totally feel
like
that.
nothing is
I
coming
totally feel
out.
that.
So
Yep.
I had to throw a party and have a lot of people in my house and say, okay, here's
So smart.
the sneak peek.
That's great.
Yeah, so Weaver threw a party and then sent me the recording after, which actually was really nice because I could hear people's reactions to it as they were telling it. And then from there, I thought about it for a really long time. And maybe I won't dive into this part right now, but there was a lot of thought of like, and I think mostly Weaver and I talked about this, but like how much of this is like in my own style, how much of this is like quote unquote historically accurate, you know, like in like the architecture of the buildings, in like what the people look like. And so I think that there was just like a long time of just thinking through that stuff. And then once the process got going, it was much faster. And I work pretty fast and I had rules for myself. Like you can't glue anything down. I just had to just like go for it, you know? And like a lot of it is pretty unsketched or very loosely sketched. And I guess I should say, so the materials are, it's like a giant roll of brown butcher paper, or packing paper, and then tracing paper, and the way you lay those over each other. And so I would cut out the brown paper and then just laminate it with packing tape to make it last longer. But yeah, so Weaver sent this story, and then I was sort of just guessing, like listening to Weaver speak, and then sort of like guessing how much that would like I'm gesturing with my hands, which I'm realizing isn't going to come across in radio, but how fast that would move across the screen, basically. But yeah, somehow it all just worked out when we got together, and we didn't really have to edit anything.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a good group of people who are connected in the right ways. You know, I thought what you said about having to figure out how to navigate the history and of this art form and visually, like architecture, things like that, resonates so strongly with those of us who play klezmer music, whatever the hell that is, and having to navigate that whole business. I have this joke it's certainly on one of these episodes where I say, if you want to write a tune for Yiddish dancing, you have to plagiarize like 80% of it and then figure out how to be like really original in the other 20%. And like, so there's that kind of constraints on it, but it is this thing that you have to sort of deal with when you're making this Yiddish art work. I say that with this tone because I don't know how to say all this stuff in words. But yeah, so now the music comes and you're faced with, maybe it's a little bit easier because I don't know if it's easier or whatever, but it's at least that's a process that you all have been engaging with for a long time of having to navigate your own voices within this tradition. Again, we're trying to let this tone, this timing and tone of my words really carry as much as I can from it.
Yeah.
Musicians, go.
I can speak a little bit about the music process. Well, I mean, it was interesting doing this, like pretty remotely at first. Like, the first thing we obviously had was the story, but and like I knew Kaya's artwork, but knew that like we weren't going to see it until we were all actually together. So most of the like starting to write the melodies and stuff was happening from just having the story. I contributed a lot of the like melodies that we brought to work with initially, and to do that I was kind of listening to Weaver a lot and like plucking things out on fiddle, even though I don't play violin. But it was like fun to like use different instruments, so I'm not just always relying on muscle memory for things. And then as far as the influences, it's like on some level I was bringing like the traditional influences that I've had from being in the klezmer scene for like 15 years or so, and like so trying to let some of that come through, and then but then also just trying to like see what comes out and like what type of music I think would go well with the story, and like so there's like many different influences. Some of them are more like trad klezmer oriented, and some of them are like maybe like from Japanese composers, or like I don't know, just other stuff that I like. And so that was in our first retreat. I brought a lot of those melodies, and then when we all got together, it became really collaborative, like moving things around and like just like experimenting, like sandboxing all the ideas and seeing what will work best. And yeah, I don't know if any of the other musicians want to try.
That was Matthias.
Oh yeah.
Rafi here. Yeah, one of the really nice things about it turning out to be a theater piece, and also, you know, like we're not playing a set of klezmer music or playing for dancing, except for that one part in the middle. But like I think from the beginning we talked and we're like, this doesn't need to be klezmer if we don't want it to be, and it was kind of an open slate, because it's like there's a story, and obviously it's like really grounded in Yiddish folklore and culture, and also if we want to take it in different directions musically, we should. So we kind of tried to get like not put ourselves in a box of trying to write klezmer music, which was really nice for the approach, I thought, because then it was just like we were able to incorporate all these other influences, and there was never really a question of like, does this sound traditional? And then some things ended up sounding fairly traditional, because that's just like what we like in some cases. But not all of it, and it's like has a wide range of different influences.
Yeah, I feel like we also just like played around with textures so much, because it's like a musical score that like includes like full compositions, full pieces that get broken up and like kind of boiled down into motifs that are spread throughout the show, and like are associated with different objects or different people, kind of like Peter and the Wolf-esque in a way, and kind of like, yeah, folktale in that kind of playful way, I guess. So I feel like just also expanding our range of textures kind of made it a little bit distance with like, I don't know, a traditional sound the whole time necessarily, and just like trying to see what music would look like under storytelling, or when it has like a more exposed moment, and like, yeah, just trying to make it engaging throughout.
Yeah, what you said, Rachel, about motifs, that I feel like is a really big thing of like in the visuals too. There's these moments that are, I looked through tons of different Jewish paper cut books, and there was this one that I'll send you the name of, but I took a lot of different things from it, but like one of them was like these medallions, which are just these like circles that reappear in many different parts of the cranky, like that. There's like a lot of paper cuts that have this like bricking in it, and that is in a lot of the underworld. There's a lot of like really specific pieces, but then a lot of the times the music also comes in when you see those things again. So there's like some subtle things that you might not pick up on when you're first watching it. That is pretty intentional on our parts of like ways to connect, I think, the music and the visuals.
We've never talked about this, so this is Weaver. I'm so interested to hear that like you had this process of releasing yourselves from making klezmer, and like from having it be like klezmer music, Jewish music, because like people, the question of like, is it Jewish, is one that people are so obsessed with everything anyone Jewish has ever made. And I just feel like what came out of these compositions is like has totally like a Yiddish tom, and like because you as performers and people are like so rooted in this, and like things that I write that have no business having a Yiddish tom like often do, because like I feel like I'm very rooted in this idiom, and it's just like that's kind of like what we could ever want, is to like be coming from somewhere and like have something that's feeding us. And that's Ursula Le Guin has this in her book of essays, The Language of the Night. She's talking about fantasy as a genre, and that fantasy is the means through which the subconscious communicates with the subconscious through the language of the subconscious. So it's like our subconsciouses are communicating with the audience through this like fantasy idiom, and that's the roots where it is like the language that it has of klezmer, of like this paper cut tradition, of this folklore tradition, are sort of these pathways that what you're making flows through, but it doesn't have to be so contrived or intentional. And that's really nice. I didn't know that was like, because it's the same thing that I think about too.
And there's a lot of freedom when it's original compositions, and we're getting to kind of be expansive in what we're doing.
Reminds me of this part in this movie, Jim Jarmusch movie, Coffee and Cigarettes, where Iggy Pop and Tom Waits are having at their diner, and Tom Waits offers Iggy Pop a cigarette, and he goes, "Oh, I quit smoking," and Tom Waits goes something like, "Well, now that you quit, you can have one." So it's like, now that you decided you're not going to make a klezmer score, you can totally just make a klezmer score, whatever that means, and it's kind of this whole thing, a lot of you mentioned the word rooted, and it makes sense because we're trying to be rooted. One of the things we do in, it's like finding your roots is not enough. That doesn't contain enough, juice. But, one of the things you just said, Weaver, that I thought about is this idea of like, is it Jewish? And it's like, I think the reason why people are so obsessed with that is because they have no fucking clue what it means for something to be Jewish. And I don't, I have some clues, and I think all of us on this call have some clues, because there are these things that are just Jewish. The Epstein brothers have this great interview, which is going to be mentioned on several episodes, where they just go, the only thing someone cared about back in the day was, could they play Jewish? And it's like, it's a little bit of a note when you see it. It's a little bit of like, in the historical place, we can assign Jewishness to this set of actions or artistic issues because of the time and place and the way people was used and the people who used it, the people who rejected it and all that stuff. There's so many different ways we categorize that. But the thing is, there is a real history, and it's really specific. The thing is, it's specific. It's not general. And it's not like, it's not even it's much more specific than like, a latke is Jewish. And it's like, because it's also not Jewish. But if you know both of those things, then you really have a picture of this kind of stuff. And this idea of just like working on getting rooted and then letting go and creating something, and I think that's this piece does feel really rooted in, a Yiddish expression, in a Jewish sense. And yet, it's also, and I think that this is also part of its rootedness, it's sort of pointing outwards to all these other kind of things, like you just brought in fantasy and Ursula Le Guin, and I was thinking about how one of my first moments getting really caught up in it was when the main character has to go to like another world, just realizes that this world's not going to contain all the things that she needs to complete her quest or whatever. And I'm a nerd for all this fantasy sci-fi stuff going way back. Certainly as, a guy trying to figure out how to live justly in the world of 2025, I've had to do a lot of like thinking and, reframing of my own reading from as a child and all that kind of stuff, and finding out other sources. But yeah, I was just like, I was thinking about, like let's say that the concept of the Jewish underworld or the concept of the Jewish other worlds from a Jewish lens, like there is a Jewish version of this in some ways that I think, takes you in some really different directions than the Christian versions of these things that we're so used to. And I was like, how do you relate to the idea of other worlds, or how much of that feels like, and maybe you could even talk about this in terms of, I'm talking about it in terms of my own history. Like, oh, yeah, I was a sci-fi nerd, and then I got into klezmer, and, like, it's sort of like, you can kind of create your own fantasy world in the best way where you're using it to sort of reimagine what life could be like in a way that's a little bit more rooted, connected, hopefully just than it is right now. But, so, like, let's take about this. Like, there's this whole big section with what you call Jerusalem Below, where it's it's really another world, and it's a Jewish underworld, and it's this thing. You don't have to tell the show, but I think it's really about, like, to me, it was something that pulled me in and out at the same time in a way that I really like about art. And I was wondering, like, just encountering these ideas that exist in our history, our Jewish history, or the Yiddish history, like, how does that work for some of you? Where does that draw you? What do you love about it?
I'm so glad you mentioned science fiction. People get so fucked up on genre, and, like, just there's so many people who'll be like, I really never read science fiction. Like, it's stupid and childish and illegitimate.
Yeah.
But, like, somehow, like, we're having these, characters go to other worlds and, like, fly through the sky, and there's a variety of technologies that they're using that do impossible things, and, like, there's people would, like, freak out if you told them there's, like, time travel stories in the Talmud, which there are, and right. Or somehow, like, these same technologies, these same ideas of, like, it's possible for us to transcend our daily experiences. It's possible that there are, like, things in the world beyond our understanding that we can catch glimpses of and make these narratives around and fantasies around. When you point to folklore and say, like, yes, you can see all of these fantasy and science fiction ideas here, it somehow gives it more legitimacy. And so people who, like, would never set foot in, like, anything sci-fi related, like, come and are like, oh wow, this is great, or, like, because it has this, like, borrowed legitimacy from tradition, when, like, really, if whether it's a chariot of fire or, like, a spaceship, or whether it's Jerusalem or another planet, it's the same journey. It's like the same, whatever subconscious narrative, like, in these different languages.
Yeah, it's the same vehicle, just seen from a different point of view. But yeah, what are some things that it pulls you into, or you're like, finally I get to tell this kind of story, and they're not going to know because it's just going to be Elijah.
And yeah, or, like, another thing with that is, like, it's something that it's like a Trojan horse for, like, disassembling the wall between children's literature and, like, adult literature, like children's media and adult media, and that these stories that people would say, oh, that's for kids or something, then, like, they can also sit down and enjoy this, like, great musical score and like visual experience also, or, like, the idea that it's available and accessible to children does not necessarily make it less rigorous or less deep. So that's something that I think about of storytelling and telling these, like, fantasy tales.
I want to come back to that idea of, like, who is this for, and how do you think about telling a story to an audience, but we'll come back to that. But yeah, I mean, specifically with the underworld or any of the other fantastical elements, Garden of Eden, come on, a utopia started it, it's like, and the dangers of, like, the utopia, it's like the allure, I loved that kind of sense of her getting lost. And I also love the pacing of the story especially with a cranky, where you kind of have to keep something, it has to literally keep moving. I mean, you can stop it, but it's like, the point is that it's moving. It's like, you can't get stuck in a plot point too hard. It's not like a book where you can like, and now the chapter is over, sit and think, or a television show even where it's like the episode's over, wait till next week, or at least that's how it used to go.
Something in there reminded me of, there's this moment where the audience always has a reaction. And it's when, so Sterna goes into the underworld in one graveyard and she comes up in a different one. And when she comes up in the different one, the audience always laughs. And it's just this funny moment to me where I'm like, I think there's something about just like, yeah, like they sort of suspend their disbelief about all of these things, like the chariot of fire, like this magic that is happening, but then that one is just like too weird for them or something, or like I don't know if it's your delivery of the line, Weaver, or what, but there's something there, I think, of just like, and she came up in a different graveyard, and they're like, what? She didn't come up where she went in?
I think it's,
and I don't know what that is.
I think it's like she's been having all these spiritual fantastical problems and is now facing a very logistical problem of like, I missed my stop, I'm at the other graveyard and I don't know how to get back.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give a thing, because Matthias, you mentioned Japanese composers, and around here in this household, we listen to the scores of the Hayao Miyazaki films a lot, mostly because they rule, but also because they're a really nice balance for our 2-year-old, and it works for all of us. It works for all three of us really well. And I was wondering if that was in the back of your mind when you said that, just because it's like, and especially because you're talking about children's stories that are really about like for everybody kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I get a lot of people say that the Garden of Eden reminds them of Miyazaki movies.
Oh, that's totally fair.
So,
yeah,
and that definitely like was a huge influence. I mean, I grew up on that stuff. So, I mean, there is a specific like Koji Kondo. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but influence.
Yeah, whatever. We'll do our best.
In that piece. So yeah, it's definitely, and like all of that media like is really like what shaped my understanding of like going on a journey, and like, because I feel like there's a certain like magicalness to all that happened, that like in those movies and everything is like just like,
it's kind of a similar balance, honestly, between like the fantastical and the real. A lot of those things. It's like, this ain't Star Wars, and it's not like, but it's also not like, hanging out in the real world. These things happen. And also, I would say something that would just, if you ever seen a movie like Spirited Away, like the plot just kind of keeps going. It's just like, you're not getting stuck in like, how are we going to solve this? Now there's a season-long arc doing on the quest to assemble all the pieces of the puzzle. It's just like, oh, you met Miriam. Okay, we have this thing. Okay, we had a conversation. Great, let's move on to the next thing. We got to get through this, everybody. So, I mean, it's fair. I mean, whatever. It's whether it's explicit or not, just trying to jump in there. But yeah, that guy's cool. They know what they're doing.
That's funny that you bring up Spirited Away, and that, Matthias, that you had that in mind too. But the scene on the train where I forget the main character's name, but she's going to see the like Baba Yaga kind of figure, the twin who is also the same. The moment on the train where it's just the scenery passing was definitely in the back of my head when I was making the Garden of Eden, which I think is like the part where I took the most liberties to just like have fun. And like, I just love plants. I wanted to like have this feeling of getting to linger there and like wanting to stay there. And I think the music captures that so well. And I remember there was, when I had finished the Cranky, and I didn't know what any of the music sounded like, really.
Whoa, yeah, right.
And I think, Matthias, maybe you hadn't even written the Garden of Eden. That came later.
Yeah, no, I had the intuition that maybe we would need another piece for that. and so I think we had kind of a synchronous, like, this needs to happen. So I think that, that piece like happened like the day before, pretty much.
So funny. Yeah, I had like I hadn't heard the music. I had this whole thing, and like the process of making this for me was just really special in that like I mostly have to draw digitally now. I'm a tattoo artist, and so it's like designing tattoos, it makes the most sense to do it on the iPad. So doing something that's just like so physical, like leaning over the desk, because this thing is like I think 24 inches tall. So like I could just do like big sweeping motions while cutting it and just really connect to the analog version of making art, which is really meaningful to me. And I think somewhere in making this too, I listened to this interview with Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy, and he said something really special of just like making I forget exactly what it was, but it was something about just like making something where like people meet you in it, and like something about making something that you're proud of. And I forget exactly what it was, but it was meaningful to me at the time. And I like had one moment of being like, I'm afraid of what the music will sound like. Like I trust these people, but I actually have no idea. And then it's just like hearing it was so much better than anything I could even imagine it to be, and especially in that Garden of Eden moment.
I'm just going to riff one more time off of the Japanese thing because it just happened to be that I have missed this live show
Right,
twice
that's
now.
right.
And, when you were all in Philly, I got to see your sound check, which was, I don't even think I saw anything. And it was also light out, so you don't see that much anyway. And then I was supposed to be at Yiddish New York, and, we just all got sick because that's what happens in the winter. And, anyway, so I'm watching this finally. And I'm on my laptop, and my wife is playing Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game in the background, which is like, I don't know if any of you guys played that video game, but it's like it's the same vibe as this Garden. Like the entire game is like this Garden of Eden vibe. It's just like chill.
That's so funny that you say
it's
that.
Just like,
because literally what I referenced is the fairy fountain theme from Legend of Zelda. So there we go.
That's what I'm saying. This stuff, but it's like we gotta,
The truth comes out.
Chestnut.
You're not escaping these ears, you know what I'm saying? But no, I'm just kidding. But it's like all this vibe, and I think, like you said, we grew up with this stuff. This stuff is super in us. Talk about being rooted in yourself. And yet it's like, a lot of these Japanese like writers and stuff are obsessed with Europe. They're obsessed with Europe, and this kind of like, you put an accordion and then you're like two steps removed, and now where it's like, the threads are just there to be pulled on for ourselves and for other people. And so it's like, I think getting back, like sort of circling back almost to like the Jewishness of this piece, or the times. And one of the things that I wrote down for a different part of the different question was just like, did anything shocking happen? And it's like, art should be transformative for the people making it as much as it is for the people who are like experiencing it. And, this was clearly is a big undertaking in terms of like your own artistic practices. And thankfully it sounds like it's so easy to just lean on your relationships and your just sort of shared aesthetics and
I think
and stuff like that with each other. But what were anything shocking happen? Anything you're like, oh, wow, here we are? And that could be, at this point we could say from the creation of the piece, but also the putting together of the piece, but also in performing the piece. One thing we were thinking about was how has the show changed as you've been performing it on tour all over the country and hopefully elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we discovered so much alignment too. In a lot of us, I mean, we didn't even all know each other when we started this project too. And it was very siloed in a certain way, which I think made it possible. Sometimes, when you're well, we could do anything, and then it's very overwhelming, and then it never happens. So I feel like something about we kind of, there was forward motion in that, but also just getting to know each other, and then also having our distinct realms, I guess. I think it was shocking that it worked. I think I was just completely shocked. There was a lot of we've never done this. We are just making our best guesses about the way to put this together. We've seen, I mean, other crankies, and we've done music, or we have our experience of how do we hold space, what does that look like, and also that's changed over time. And we premiered this for the first time basically the same day or week this time last year, and we did a dress rehearsal for some people. It was the first, and it was the first time Kaya was meeting everyone, literally just coming together. We saw the cranky just that week, and it was shocking and just energizing to feel the reception, and just I think just that the magic was conveyed, or that it, there is so much that goes into theater, pacing, we're just oh, I guess I hope we did that right. And then just also just workshopping it. I think it took about doing it 5 or 6 or 7 times. We did a lot of stops on our first tour at a lot of libraries, and for a lot of kids as well, which was also really amazing to see the preschoolers look at the cranky it was a glowing screen. They honestly, I don't think they knew what it was until after, and be oh, this, you could make this, this is so simple and it's so captivating, and how something can be so enchanting and be so simple was really powerful. And also, I would just say, so intentional for this project. I definitely feel part of the vision is to make something that is so universal in that way, and kind of blowing people's expectations of what's intriguing for all ages, for a Jewish audience, for non-Jewish audience, and that's also who we are too, and just making something that feels meaningful and very us, and and just to see that translate. I think that was pretty shocking.
It always means so much to me, after the show, especially when kids come up and just are able to see how it's made, especially when so much of stuff that is sort of puked up in front of them is so not only is it inane bullshit that it passes for kids media, but they the process by which it's made is completely mystified to them. There's when I was a little kid looking for the characters inside the box TV and not finding anything. Right. I was well, I guess something's happening in here that I just have no idea how it's happening and I can't participate in. But then Kaya always lets them play with the shadow puppets, and it's just we've had teachers come who then do little cranky projects with their classes, and it's putting the means of cultural production completely in people's hands, and saying that the more that we demystify this process, the more that people can feel empowered to tell their own stories, and that's really special.
And the real mysteries, that are actually the important mysteries, are the things that you get to focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That part is really important to me, of just it being accessible to people, and I like that it's all on display there. So Dan, you saw the close-up video, but when you're seeing it live, I'm turning the handles, and so you can see it happening in real time.
I've done enough of these that I was able to sort of add that in. Yeah.
But
I hear you. It's really cool. Sometimes I get more excited by the scroll than the piece.
Yeah, and I will also say I feel like we've kind of also gone waves because we've toured this pretty extensively over the past year, and it is a really tight show. Like there's so many cues, like interlocking cues between the music, the storytelling, and the visuals. So it's like we're all like kind of in communication with each other. And sometimes you're just doing the same thing. It becomes very like technical rather than like expressive sometimes if you've done it so many times. And we had the opportunity this past January, was it January, that we went to the Chocolate Church, which is an amazing venue in Bath, Maine, and got to study with Matthew Glassman and Jeremy Ian, which was so special. We got to do like a residency there where I feel like was also one of the first opportunities we got to be together because we all live in different places too. We got to just be together and just like get to know each other as artists and just like have space to play.
We hadn't really had any directorial input
Correct.
until we worked with them. And so that was really special. And they are such geniuses and
Truly.
amazing people. And a big takeaway was in order to just like really honor the work that we've made in our relationships, we actually need to like warm up as if we are performing a theater piece, because it turns out it's a theater piece, and make space for it. That's not just walking on stage. And so that was really transformative to do this like warm up cycle that we sort of developed.
And seeing the piece as like a ritual and experience, and like it is like welcoming people into this experience of wonder where you don't know what you're about to experience. You know, like you couldn't have imagined what you're about to see, and also that like trying to like get into the headspace of like an emotive, like being in a place of expression where we're also with you in that. So we're connecting to each other and like that radiates outward. We're not entertainment. And I think that is, I just like it is immersive and it's participatory in that way. It's like we wouldn't be creating this without the audience. Like we are creating this all here together right now and like honoring that and like kind of grounding in that intention before we do the show, which we've done many, many times now. So I feel like that was a really, really amazing experience that we got to have this residency that was in January. And I think that affected the show a lot and kind of gave it new life too, and like allowed us to connect with it more deeply.
I think it also like encouraged us all to think of ourselves as theater musicians or theater performers, sorry. Like not just Weaver, because we also are, on stage, and Jeremy and Matthew encouraged us to have costumes specifically for the show. And like, we haven't, I have a costume, but we haven't quite figured that out. But just like the way we walk onto the stage, the way we engage during the performance, like if we're distracted or like, I don't know, it makes a difference how we engage with the story too, which makes sense.
The ritual framing has been really
the ritual framing.
I forget. Do you all face the cranky when you're playing, or do you face the audience?
The way we set up is like I always face the cranky. I mean, I'm kind of like facing sideways, so I like have a lot of contact with Weaver and Kaya and the cranky, and Rachel Matthias for that matter. And I like, I mean, at this point we all know it really well, but earlier in the process, I think I was giving more cues of like trying to like line specific things up with the cranky and showing it in the playing. But Rachel Matthias can sometimes see the cranky. It kind of depends on the setup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because when I do the stuff that I've done with, projections, mostly when I work with my friend Eric, he's doing his live projection thing. And I think I only did the cranky version of this, although he's done many crankies with many musicians who I really admire. And everybody should go check him out, too, because
we actually got to play with him at a festival in New Jersey.
Cranky Fest.
Oh, that's so great.
That was great. I've loved his art for a long time. Definitely like in the underworld in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Some of his paper cuts were really inspiring for that.
He does brickwork really, really well. And I've got so many pieces of his hanging around the house or in somewhere. And but in that when we do the Ominous Cloud Ensemble, we're just facing it's in the dark and we're just facing the projection, and there's no sense of like and And it's also like, so it's such like a punk rock vibe, the idea that we would like do this kind of like and it's not a P, it is, sometimes it's a P, anyway, doesn't matter. The point is it's a different kind of thing, and I think that's great that you can move into it. And I think that's a really good segue to start to move into this, thinking about like the end game of both this interview and also like the kind of thing. I know you have a tour coming up that is exciting, although probably that'll already have happened by the time this airs. And like, yeah, I mean, so, going, two things I want to go back to. One is the fact that you're the Magid Ensemble. You're not a bunch of really cool people or even a group playing this piece. Like, the idea, as you've been able to spend some more time together, how have you been able to have conversations about your identity as a performing group or like anything like that? And, maybe you're thinking about next steps. Maybe you're just like, yo, chill, Dan. And but what kind of things does that happen in terms of like naming yourselves as like figuring out who you are as a group and like what that might mean for whatever that you want to share about that? Don't need to
I'm embarrassed to say that I think we all learned that ensemble actually meant something also during this presidency.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what
that it like might mean something for our future or like how we relate to each other as a project. I think we thought it sounded cool. But I think we've now talked about future work, and yeah, we're about to do this West Coast tour, which is really exciting for me because it's where I live. So most of my people for the last year have been like just hearing about it from all sorts of people. But yeah, we're about to do that tour, and I don't know, maybe Rachel and Weaver, you could talk about future project stuff.
Oh.
I mean, you don't have to give anything away, although we love an exclusive scoop. No, but really, just like, do you feel like you're a band now?
I feel like we're a band. I don't think I can call us a band. I keep saying like our project or the project I'm part of. But I guess you all are in a band.
I'm always saying I'm in a band because I think that's cool. I know I don't play.
Bands are cool.
You do.
The Magid band.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, yeah, I mean, from visioning to like doing this to like where we are now, like I feel like I feel like we've all grown and changed a lot too, and just like become excited about new things. I mean, like I hadn't really been interested in like shadow theater as much, and just like doing the show has like made me really, really excited about that. And just like thinking about like new technologies or just like different ways to like create storytelling experiences. I feel like we've been thinking a lot about, and like what are like how to push the boundaries of that and like the expected, and how to like bring people in like in new ways, kind of using our different elements and our different strengths and interess.
And like now that we've all sort of come together, having come together over this project, and like in some ways started it sort of siloed in our own genres, and now smushing it all together, and having this, and now that we're all together, like we have opened up possibilities of working together in different ways, of like devising stuff where it's not just story, music, art, that can be a little more integrated from jump, instead of like starting separately and sort of weaving together. So I think that's something I feel excited to explore. Can we do that without freaking out?
Definitely.
Find out next time.
No, totally. It's like making the first album is one thing, and then making the second album is like, does the band stay together? And no, don't worry about that. You all seem very grounded and level-headed, and have other things that can, anyway,
and
whatever. Stay together and like enjoy each other first, and then figure out what the project is.
And I think also part of it was like, like having certain milestones, or like recording it in a way that felt really important. Speaking of, we're about to release an album of the music, and it felt very important to like, have a record of like what we've been working on. And there's so many different ways to do that. We were like, should we make a picture book? Should we make a storytelling album? Like there's so many possibilities, and like there's so many, so much beautiful visual work, like there's just so many avenues to like get to share and record and document this work. But we're very excited that we are releasing a album soundtrack which like features like all the original compositions in full form on Borscht Beat on May 15th, which might have already happened by the time this comes out. But yeah, no, just like that felt like an important like part of this process as well for us to like also like go through the process of more deeply arranging the music for a recorded version, which is very different than the show, which is kind of based on the pacing and the cues and like often just like shorter segments of the pieces. So that felt like an important thing to have documented for ourselves.
There were a lot of
That's
original
cool.
compositions that were longer that we had to like chop up a little bit to get them into the show, or it's like to make it fit with what was happening in the Cranky. And so in the album we have some longer form things, which is nice to
That's
Yeah.
cool.
have that opportunity.
And that also speaks to how it was created, right? So like there was like lots of compositions that either like went along to certain parts of the story or also just to kind of be used and like patchworked in.
It was fun doing the album too, because we actually like got to do a lot more work on the music for that and then incorporate it back into the show.
Yeah.
So like since we did that project, the music evolved a lot too.
Were there any things you composed that just didn't make it in at all? Like we've never talked. What's on like the cutting room floor of this?
I mean, there's parts in the album that never made it.
Yeah,
into the
well,
show.
there's one really kind of Greek sounding part of the opening piece that's on the album that didn't end up getting used in the show, and because it just doesn't like fit the narrative. It didn't really fit the narrative anywhere, but we just decided to put it on there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple things that made it into the show but didn't make it into the album.
That is true. Yeah.
Like every interlude.
But we did do some sound effects on the album, which should be interesting. Just
good.
Short little tracks of experimentation.
I love a short
journey.
little experimental track. Yeah, as it should be. So is the piece, you know. Any plans or ideas of how to do it sounds like a sort of similarly like quasi-independent or maybe not independent visual component to anything?
Oh, to produce together for recording?
Well, I know you all are the royalty of merch.
yeah.
I just remember those Cles Canadas, but like,
Weaver wrote some background to the folklore, and I'm actually today putting together a little booklet that I'm printing on Risograph tomorrow that's going to go along with the album. So it's going to have some visuals and the background behind some of the stuff.
Yeah, no, it really it means a lot. I remember when Josh Waletsky was recording his album that came out a while ago now. I remember we were talking about it, and I was like, man, CDs, who cares about CDs? Like, make a cool book of the lyrics. You want them in Yiddish and want them in Oisius and transliteration and English. That takes up a lot of pages. If you're gonna like make a booklet that's like thicker than a CD, you might as well make a book with a CD in the back of it, And I don't think I was the only one who said that, but that's what happened. And I'm like, this is it doesn't fit on my CD rack anymore, but it's a much better artifact for it. It's a much better like thing that you can kind of bite your teeth into. I love a CD, but I'm also 41 and I grew up in the era of CDs. Okay, so one final thought that I was thinking about, going back to what you said, Weaver, about this idea of children literature or children's art and adult art, and this kind of like, we don't like F that, right? Like this is for something that's like really for everyone at every engagement point, which is a beautiful quality of our entire Yiddish scene, where we really prize that kind of engagement with people. And then the sci-fi element, I just finished reading this book by Samuel Delany called Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand. And it's the second, that's a book, Jesus. Mm-hmm. And thinking about his work, and my most recent album was done in collaboration with, and has nothing to do with Jewish music, except that, of course, it comes in. But it was done in collaboration with a friend of mine who is a incredible, Black queer artist, sci-fi writer named Alex Smith, and writer, musician, visual artist, you name it. That's the punk rock. You got to do it all aesthetic, and he's always challenging me on all this stuff. And he was like, you got to read my favorite book, Stars on My... And what's interesting about this guy, Samuel Delany, is like, yo, that is some not for everybody kind of stuff. Like, there's just like sex everywhere. And it's like, that's cool. And the way it comes in this particular book is like absolutely like lays waste to like these ideas of society as it should be, or what really is a thing, or what are these, it's so radical in its questioning of gender, sexuality, all these things. And just, that's running around in my head a lot right now. And then you mentioned this idea about adult, and like, yeah, I mean, in future pieces, do you feel like that there's like, other ways of telling stories, and anything Jewish about that? I guess because it's a klezmer podcast. But, I mean, just like, yeah, I mean, something where it's like, oh, we're going to make some adult shit now. Not that you have to, not that you should, just like, these other ideas of like fantasy or science fiction or folklore or whatever you want to call it, coming in and like, I don't know, does that resonate in any way with anybody?
Stay tuned for our R-rated
sophomore
project.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, it could happen.
We've joked about this a lot.
It's natural. It's like natural.
I've been really into Samuel Delany lately, actually, and I just read this essay of his called Coming/Out, and it's just like, it's talking about the notion of the closet. And it's an incredible essay, but it just like, it is like anti-genre. It's like, it's so much more just about like the gray area between things and anti-binary like that. And I don't know. I love making work that is like, is it for adults? Is it for kids? Is it, like, I think that will continue to be something in our work. I think that feels important to me, to make like art that doesn't feel didactic, art that like can be interpreted in different ways. Yeah.
Shout out to J-Ro. That's Jenny Romaine, who
Always
has taught me that, just like through her work with young people, that there's very little that youth can't grasp and can't participate in, if it's available and presented with respect. Like, people of all ages, very very young and very old, and everyone in between, can kind of reach up for it, and extend themselves to grab onto it, and we all have capacity to do that. And it's a question of, as audience members, do we feel respected enough to do that? Are things communicated in a way where they're accessible without talking down to us? And communication can be like through metaphor, through folklore, through a variety of different like music and visuals and different mediums that you can grab onto. So.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, we get to really fight for including our whole selves in our art. And for those of us who participate in Yiddish culture, we have this opportunity to draw on, this sense of being diaspora people, or drawing on or like engaging with a diaspora culture, a culture that is adaptable, that can land, that can lift off, that can that has some things that go way, way, way back, and then uses those to create new stuff. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about the world of Yiddish literature, is the way it presumes such a large amount of cultural, religious, textual kind of like understanding in order to like sort of bop around with it. Not to like understand what the correct thing is, but to like play with it, right? And even some, and you have even some things like, I almost feel like, I don't know, I was just like, does Fiddler on the Roof even have a little bit of that here and there? Maybe. But like, it's like, but certainly all the work that those of us who are really trying to center a Yiddish life, like, and not just like the whitewashed or like, let's sand off all the edges. So maybe we'll be universal. Wouldn't that be cool? But just go, no, this is a part of this is a human experience, and human experiences are universal experiences, and this is a specific one that then sort of reaches out to everybody. I think that that's a great opportunity of stuff that, people like Jenny Romaine sort of showed that this tradition is very capable of carrying, like, pretty strongly. And then all the people who made music with Jenny and people like that, I think, figured out a way to do that too. And that's one of the things that I love about this, and why the music feels so close to, it feels so radical to me still, even when I'm playing for dancing or something, or there's so much space for expression or something like that. So any final thoughts, anything we didn't cover that you really want to say about, and then just tell people where they can, all the ways that they can get on your radar, get you on their radars.
Manual Cinema.
Yes.
If you're listening to this, we have a crush on you.
Yes.
Oh, that was a question I had. Yeah, keep going. Hopes and dreams. Get into it.
We would like to hang out with Manual Cinema.
Okay. We'll tag them on Blue Sky or something like that.
We really want to do like a run of shows in many places, but for the most part, what we've done is touring where we're in a different city or every night, and we go, it's a manageable setup, but it's a lot to do that. And then every time we do it, people are like, when's the next one? We want to come back. We want to tell our friends. And sometimes we've had really good luck selling out to like back-to-back shows because word spreads. And what we really are hoping for would be to do like a run of a week or a couple weeks or less or more. But at like a independent theater kind of venue, where we have really like time to be in one place and develop it and continue doing what we're doing. That's a goal.
Rachel would like someone to bring us to Europe and to do a run of shows, perhaps somewhere beautiful in the south of France.
Wouldn't that be nice? I hope you get to do it.
Somebody said that we couldn't do the show in France in English, but we might be able to do it in Yiddish. So stay tuned for the Yiddish version.
The Yiddish version is happening like next week, right?
It is.
Oh, snap. There you go. That's great. So where can people find you? What do they need to know about some other, all the other projects? Just tell us about everything that people need to know so that they can go like follow you around and buy your shit and get into it.
I mean, everything is on magidensemble.com basically, and you can find all the other links. I don't even know. I don't use social media. Yeah, we have an upcoming tour on the West Coast, and we're hoping for something in September and going forward. And I think we're collaborative together, and we want to like meet other people doing similar stuff. And Weaver mentioned Manual Cinema. It's been just like this whole project has gotten me really excited about what the heck other people are doing in areas that I just didn't know about. So like if you do similar things, like would love to connect or do things together and just like continue to keep learning together.
And if anyone listening has a lot of money that they want to give us to make a new project, we would take it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I say at my bar gig, no amount is too small.
Truly.
No amount is too large. No amount is too large. Well, everybody, the Magid Ensemble, what a treat to get to hang out with you all and to talk. And this was just really fun. And I hope people get a chance to see you wherever you are and experience this work. And I can't wait to finally actually get to see you live someday.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
Dan.
having us.
Thank you, Dan.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, that was my conversation with all the folks of the Magid Ensemble. Rachel, Matthias, Rafi, Weaver, and Kaya, thanks for coming on, and it was great to get into a conversation with you. Some of you I've known for a long time. Some of you I got to know mostly through this conversation, and for all of it, it was a joy, and it was so much fun to, as my mentor and favorite musician, Anthony Braxton says, kick it about. It was great to be able to draw in all these different threads of our lives, of our excitement with art, and just see how it all comes together when you allow yourself to be a fully human artist, when you allow yourself to bring everything you got and put it into the work to make what you want to share with people in the world. So that's great. And that's it for right now. We'll be coming back with another episode next month. We've got some really wonderful conversations that I can't wait to share with you, with folks inside and outside of our Yiddish scene. People are doing amazing work. If you haven't had a chance to sign up, go sign up for Klez Canada. It's coming up soon, and maybe I'll see you there. If not, I'll see you around Philly, New York, or wherever else they drag me to play this freaking music that I love and will continue to push out on you as long as I can. So with that, hope you're all staying well, staying cool if you're in the heat, and good Shabbos.